Thank you for being on
Okay,
Cocktails with Kyle.
cheers. Two
Um,
fingers.
yeah, so let's start with a question that I've broached, I think, a few times over our long friendship, and we always get sidetracked. But
Yeah.
you went to Afghanistan to research a book years ago,
Uh-huh.
and I've never really gotten to hear the story on that, like why you did it, what it was like. So let's hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I
And we're
mean, it
going to put
was,
some photos up, I think.
yeah, you guys will probably throw some up. So, I got invited by a team of guys that were doing some interesting things over there on the intelligence side. So, building human networks and then going out and collecting from their networks. So, I mean, it was during the war. This was back in 2008. And I went over for a couple of weeks. It was an amazing experience. Flew through Dubai. I don't ever need to go to Dubai again. I can't believe all these influencers that live in Dubai. I mean, it's just so restrictive and anti-liberty, and just just any place that's got Sharia attached to it is no place I have any desire to ever go again.
It's a
Uh,
nice airport, though.
yeah, no, it's a nice airport and there's great hotels and they let you drink there and stuff. But I remember leaving Afghanistan. They had warned me. They said, "Listen, you have to make sure there's no ammo in any of your bags or in your pockets," because they said for every bullet they catch you with, and this is not Sharia, so now I'm changing the subject, but for every bullet they catch you with, it's a year in prison. And so my guys are like, "You clean, you don't have a single piece of lead on you, nothing, no." And I'm like, "Nope, I'm good, I'm good." And they're like, "Great." And then they turned my bags inside out, like I had folded everything. It's like, it's like a drill sergeant upending your footlocker. And they went through everything and they said, "Sorry, man, you can repack now, but we actually had to make sure that you didn't screw up because, we don't want to see you go into the pokey in Dubai." So it was fun. We went in and out of Dubai, and we flew this crazy old Russian Russian aircraft where you could, like the guys have been hitting the vodka bottles in the cockpit. And I joked, I'm like, I paid for a first class ticket. How could I tell which seats are first class? And these guys said it's got the blue duct tape instead of the silver duct tape around the armrest. So it was a great experience. That whole Pashtunwali code with the Pashto is amazing, where they'll protect you to the last man in the village if you're one of their guests. So the villages we went to, we were already invited in, so we were their guests, and so they took good care of us. And what was interesting is up there with being a doctor, one of the most esteemed professions in Afghanistan is author. So it
Really?
was, yeah. So the team I was with, I was wondering how they were going to introduce me. And they're like, "No, no, no, we're going to tell everybody who you are," and all that kind of stuff. This was the year. So this was before The Last Patriot came out, where I had a whole missing chapter of the Quran. And there was a bunch of upset in the Islamic community about that book. So it was before that book was published. Listen, it was great. I thought I wouldn't like the food. I thought I'd lose a ton of weight. The food was fabulous. Best fried chicken I ever had was in Jalalabad. And, we go on the base, the different forward operating bases occasionally if we needed to get water or hit the PX or whatever. But everything else was outside the wire. So it was pretty, pretty cool. We were in thin skinned vehicles. The first thing these guys did is they said, "Hey, did you bring sunglasses?" I'm like, "I always bring my sunglasses." They're like, "Give them here. You don't get to wear them for the rest of the trip." I'm like, "Why?" And they said, "Nothing marks you, particularly at a distance, as a Westerner like a pair of sunglasses. You're not going to see Afghan guys rolling around in sunglasses." They said, "So it immediately draws attention to you." And I had grown a beard. You'll see if you haven't already in the photos, they'd had me grow a beard and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, listen, it was a good trip. I got to learn the culture, a lot of super nice people. I really enjoyed it. I was surprised by what a good time I had there.
That's an amazing experience too, because it's so hard to make stuff up when in like a war zone or something with a such a
Yeah.
rich atmosphere unless you've been there. What's it smells like? Great fried chicken. Like you can't pick up those details without actually putting your feet on the ground there.
Yeah, it
So
was.
Afghanistan's a pretty big trip.
Yeah, it's a big trip, and there's a lot of different places. I had wanted to go down to Kandahar, and I had something that I wanted to see. And one of the guys that was kind of the senior in-country guy for this team, he's like, "We're not going to Kandahar." I'm like, come on. He's like, there's a reason they send the Marines to Kandahar. We're not going to Kandahar. I'm like, come on. It's, what was that line from Stripes? It's like going into Czechoslovakia. It's like going into Wisconsin. You zip in, you zip out. Somebody says, I once got my ass kicked in Wisconsin. So we didn't go. There was a particular thing that was going to be happening in Kandahar, and we didn't go. And then while I was in Afghanistan, there was a suicide bombing at the event I wanted to go to and see in Kandahar. They were trying to kill a police chief, and there were like 50 people that got killed. And so the top in-country guy on the team says, Thor, you have such bad fucking judgment. You don't even get to decide where we stop to take a piss for the rest of this trip. You're a lightning rod for trouble, as far as I'm concerned. He was just
We're going to
busting
do
my
the
chops.
opposite of everything you think we
The
should.
George Costanza plan was put in full effect at that point. Yeah. No, so it was good natured teasing and that kind of stuff. But what was interesting is they had reserved me a hotel room in Kabul because they didn't know how I was going to react once it hit me that I was in Afghanistan. They said a lot of people talk a big game, all this kind of stuff, and then their feet hit the tarmac and they're like, oh shit, what did I agree to? And so they had a room reserved for me, and they were going to dump me in this hotel for a couple of weeks while they did what they had to do and come back and get me. And then we'd fly back out to Dubai. But it didn't happen. I rode with them the whole time, and it was just a really, really cool experience. Great people, and very, very knowledgeable about the culture. They were really all about the hearts and minds. And I learned the difference between capital T Taliban and small T Taliban, people that were affiliated with the Taliban just to survive, as opposed to fully ideologically bought in to the Taliban whole ethos. So it was a great, great, great experience. I'm glad I did it. I look back now as I was pulling those photographs for you. I had to go back to the year in my iPhotos, and I was like, oh my gosh, look how young my kids were. What was I thinking? Getting on a plane and going over to a war zone to do this, but I mean, with age comes wisdom, and you have a different risk tolerance when you're younger than when you get a little more seasoned. So, but it was great. Nothing happened. I heard gunfire. It was never directed at us. So
If you,
all was good.
yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about being young, right? You build all these great memories and think, boy, I wouldn't do that again, but I'm happy I did it when I did. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
All right, that's cool. I'm glad I finally got to hear that full story without us, being in a chaotic situation. All right, next topic I wanted to ask you about is really just about the evolution of thrillers now. I mean, you think about they started out maybe as kind of World War II thrillers, then we went into the Soviet era, then we
World
went into
War.
the
Yeah.
Islamic terrorism era, and now I don't know. To me, it feels a lot murkier. The idea of there being a very clear good guy and bad guy in situations is different. A lot of internal strife, whether that be in Europe or the United States or wherever. I mean, how are you dealing with that challenge? I know some of our friends are saying, I think I'm going to write a historical thriller because it's so complicated and it's so fast changing now. But you're not. You're charging forward, right?
Yeah, it's tough. Obviously, we are more partisan as a nation in the United States than we ever were before. The culture wars are at a fever pitch. I just got my first review today as we're taping this. I got it this morning. First review for my new book coming out next month, Edge of Honor, and from the Real Book Spy. And he complimented me on how well I threaded that needle without taking sides politically, setting a thriller in DC and making the thriller not only exciting, but accessible to everyone. So it doesn't matter how you see the real world. I mean, this is fiction, what we're doing. So, I don't want to comment on anything that's going on politically because I want my books to be a break for people. I want it to be a getaway, an escape, so on and so forth. The hardest thing for me, and I'm going to back up a second for people who haven't read any of my books before. I have a series character, but I tell people that my books are like the James Bond movies, that it doesn't matter if you've never read a Brad Thor book before, you can start with Edge of Honor. You can start with the newest one. If you're at the bookstore and they've only got one, doesn't matter where it falls in the series, you can pick it up, you can read it, you can enjoy it. Just like seeing the newest James Bond movie, doesn't matter if you've seen any of the prior ones. So, I try to keep the politics out of it as much as I can beyond like there's jockeying for power between different agencies and people within the agencies and that kind of stuff. I don't go Republican or Democrat in the books. But the big thing for me with this book was where I start Harvath. He, in a previous book, there'd been a bounty on his head, and he managed to work everything out to get the contract canceled and keep half the money for the bounty. So Harvath banked all this money. CIA found out about it and froze it to blackmail him into service in my book last year. And so this year, I kind of had that supermodel problem from the 90s, that Linda Evangelista problem, where she said she doesn't get out of bed for less than $100,000. And I thought, what would Harvath, if he's got all this bank now, if it's all socked away, what gets Harvath out of bed? What would motivate him? Why would he stand in front of a hail of bullets? And so that was kind of cool. And I still play with things that are happening in the news. I think that verisimilitude is really important for great thrillers like you and I do, where you can't ignore what's happening in the world. But you're right. Things are changing now. In fact, I was like, oh, do I have a NATO angle in this, or will NATO be completely evaporated by the time the book comes out? So I think that's where the art in this comes in. Like, I never wrote about bin Laden because I knew bin Laden. I never put him in a book because I knew eventually he was going to be captured at room temperature. It was just a matter of time. So this is the careful path we have to trot, and it's not easy. It does make things very difficult, and I also take a lot of inspiration from the news. So, like, it's tough when things are changing so quickly. That does make it really, really hard. And who do you paint as the bad guys? And you have to be thinking a year out too. That's the other thing. You got to try to beat the headlines, beat rapidly changing headlines, which is hard, but that's what we're supposed to do. That's our job.
Sure. I mean, and I remember you talking about, oh, I'm, pretty fearless. I'm gonna talk about Ukraine, and I'm
Yeah,
gonna do a
a
book
couple
about
books ago.
Ukraine, and hopefully, the history won't get ahead of me. And you did. It worked for you.
So the Ukraine book is Deadfall. That was 2 books ago. And I always loved Saving Private Ryan, and then all the stuff based on the Alistair MacLean books, where Eagles Dare, The Guns of Navarone, whether it's the books or the movies. And I wanted to do a World War II style thriller for Harvath. And now you've got this massive war on the continent, and Harvath, I can inject him in there and play with all those World War II era thriller plot devices and things like that. And so that book was a lot of fun for me. And at the time, I had no idea how long the Ukraine war would carry on. And so, if you were paying attention, there's a lot of barbarity. The Russians are bad, bad. They're bad people on the government level. There's great Russia. Every population has great citizens. They have a fucking horrific government. The
Yeah.
Russians, they're bad fucking people. Anybody that tells you Russia is good at the government level is either ignorant or lying. So I hate the Russian government. I despise people who backstop them and try to give them, any support whatsoever. So yeah, I had people that were pissed. They're like, "You sound like the Ukrainian minister of propaganda." It's like, fuck you. You got a bad media diet. Now we're back to bad media diet. The
Yeah.
shit that the Russians have done in Ukraine is horrific. Whether it's the kidnapping of tens of thousands of children to re-educate them and make them Russian and forget that they're Ukrainian, to the stuff that happened in Bucha and the rapes and the tortures, the Russians suck. They suck big time. And I was
They're
thrilled to write the
vandals.
book.
Like they're like the world's
Yes,
vandals because
barbarians.
they're
They're
not even
terrible.
necessarily trying to gain anything from themselves. They just want to stick it to everybody else. I remember when I
What?
wrote Red War I wanted to do this is years before the Ukraine war, but I wanted to do the Russians attacking Ukraine and into NATO and everything. It was really funny because I almost didn't write the book because any way you gamed it out, the Russians lost. There was just no point to them doing it. And I had a conceit that the head of Russia had a brain tumor and all this stuff.
Okay.
But who knew it wasn't necessary? They would just be like, oh, my motivation is he's going to get a wild hair, kill
Yeah.
a million of his own guys
Which
for
has happened in
what,
real life.
0.5% of Ukraine territory that he may not even be able to hold on to.
No,
And and this is one of the things that's a problem for us now is we're in the prediction game. Like you said
yeah, yeah,
earlier,
yeah.
people don't think, well, you're not writing a book to come out today. It's a year and a half or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And predicting what crazy thing is going to happen in the world. I mean, think about Hamas. Like, who
Hmm.
told them that was a good idea? The
Yeah.
outcome was assured on
Oh,
that first
they
day.
were going to get smashed. It
There's
was the
slaughter.
Israelis were going to be merciless. How they thought anything other than that was going to happen, I don't know.
And so why would you come up with, oh, that's going to happen? You're like, that's just like no one in their right mind would do something like that. But I feel like no one in their right mind would do something like that. Is sort of like every headline that you
Yeah.
read nowadays.
Yeah.
Used to
No,
be Cold
listen.
War was great. It was, the Russians against us, and it was the for the dominance of the world and ideology, and it was
Yeah.
nice and predictable.
Black
You
hats,
had
white
great,
hats.
a
Yeah.
million plots you could delve into, and but now it just seems like it's turned into
Well,
the Wild West to some extent.
last year with Shadow of Doubt, as I was casting about for a story, I actually took something that had happened back during the Cold War under Kennedy and said, "That's cool. What if I did that today?" And under Kennedy, it got discovered. So there was a Russian defector that we got here in the United States in the 60s. And one of the things he admitted during his debrief was that the French government was shot through with Russian spies. This is real life. This really happened. And the CIA was freaking out because there were people around de Gaulle and all this kind of stuff. And they're like, there's no effing way we can just send a telex to warn our counterparts over there. And so Kennedy dictated a letter to one of his closest aides and had that guy hand carry this letter to de Gaulle. He said, stand there, have de Gaulle read it, and then take the letter back. And this really happened. And then de Gaulle was freaked out and he sent a couple of his own intel people he trusted to come over and debrief this defector. And then they realized what was going on in France and all this kind of stuff. So I said, what if that was happening today? What if the French government was shot through with Russian spies and all that kind of stuff? And that helped me build a really cool plot for last summer's book, Shadow of Doubt. So I do try to find inspiration. I look at things that have happened in the past, and what if we did that today? That's kind of the new thing I'm doing because it really is. And then mix in some current stuff. Like I mixed in something about Russia moving nuclear weapons into Belarus and that kind of a thing. So I have a little sprinkling of current events in there, sort of thing.
Well, and certainly an edge of honor too, because you're talking. I mean, I think we're thinking along the same terms with my new book, Fade In. The rise of the elites and the power of the elites you're talking about in that book as well, right?
Yeah, so basically, what I did with Edge of Honors, I kind of wanted to do like the Jacobins in the French Revolution and have kind of the reign of terror. And these people that are like, our faction's going to be. I essentially based this on we had the youngest president since Kennedy elected. So we've got a new young president, like a Justin Trudeau kind of a guy, super young, super handsome. He got a lot of popularity just because he was so good looking. There was an October surprise that pissed him off because he was convinced it came out of the CIA. He still won the election, but he's really angry with the intelligence community. And because he's so angry at the CIA and the FBI, that blinds him to this faction in DC that's trying to unseat him and get him shoved out of office. Essentially, he promised a bunch of stuff on the campaign trail, came into office, and then was like, boy, maybe I shouldn't have promised that. I don't think that's actually good for the health of the country. I'm going to back off on that. And so there was a very, very what am I looking for? Very, very wound up, very intense faction that backed him when he came into office and was unhappy with how his policies changed and felt cheated. So they want to push him out, and then he won't listen to his domestic or foreign intelligence services. So it creates this whole thing. And then Harvat's got to spring into action because he's got a buddy of his. I reached back to the Soleimani attack. I have a buddy of mine that was involved with with putting together the attack or the hit on Soleimani in Iraq, and he was the IRGC guy from the Quds Force guy from Iran, and we smoked him with a drone when he was leaving the airport in Baghdad. So I wanted to do something where Harvath had somebody from his past who was in like deep trouble and he couldn't get any help in DC because they weren't doing security details anymore. So I kind of took that from present day that you had former officials that could not get protection. And this guy's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't afford a protective detail. I don't even know who's after me. And Harvath's like, well, one step at a time, we'll take care of you and let me see if we can figure out what's going on. So that was Harvath's reason to get out of bed. Even though he had all the doughs, he had a friend come to him and say, I'm in trouble. In fact, it wasn't a friend so much as it's a colleague that I brought back from when Harvath actually got kidnapped by the Russians in Backlash. This guy was the hostage czar that was working on trying to pinpoint where in Russia Harvath was so that we could launch an op to get him out and across the border into Finland. So it was fun to bring that character back. So that's kind of the little seeds in how I, it's a minefield. Again, I didn't step on any political mines, but I had to weave, going through the story.
But that's an interesting thing though of having you have so many, it's such a rich universe now, the Harbath universe with so many books, and you have to write each one, as you said, that somebody could just pick it up, enjoy it, they'd know who Harbath was. On the other hand, you can't put so much in there that you bore your fans because they're
Right.
like, oh, I know all this stuff.
Yes.
But you also have all that fun stuff to pull from, all the old characters, the things that happened, and you can really pull those into the current context, and it gives you a lot of great ideas.
So that's what I'm telling people. Like I did the whole like I put out a video saying, "Hey, if you haven't read me before, you can start with Edge of Honor, like the James Bond movies. You're up to speed like that. And if you are a long-term reader, I've put a lot of Easter eggs in here for you that you're going to love seeing. So if you're a first-time reader, you may read past some of these things and just think, "Oh, that's kind of interesting, kind of cool." If you're a long-time reader, you'll go, "Oh my God, I remember that. That's so cool that he brought that back," sort of a thing. So yeah, it's that is probably one of the biggest challenges. And you were in there doing the Mitch Rapp books for so long. You have to know that universe better than anybody else, and you have to keep everything top of mind because there's going to be somebody who just finished reading all the books and will call you on something if you got it right. If you know what I mean, or if you got it wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry, if you got it wrong, if you didn't get it right, there's going to be somebody that calls you on it, and rightly so. But I look at this and this year's book, Edge of Honor, is my 24th
Wow.
Harvath novel. And it's funny too, if for people who don't know, I knew Kyle before I was ever an author. That's what's really funny.
Right.
Our families are friends. So I knew Kyle back in the day when I was still doing a travel series nationwide on public television. And Kyle was kind enough. Kyle gave me my very first blurb for my very first book. I got a blurb from Kyle, from Vince Flynn, God rest his soul, and Nelson DeMille, God rest his soul. So Kyle was very, very good to me
Oh my
in the
God, I'm the
beginning of
only
my
one
career.
left.
As I started rattling off the names in their current status, I was like, "Oh crap, yeah." So, yep. So stay
We've been at
healthy.
this for a long time. I remember we got together at a restaurant in Jackson Hole,
Yeah.
and you had not published your first book yet, but you were getting ready to.
Hmm.
And yeah, I remember us leaving and my wife Kim saying, "Yeah, that guy's going places." And I said,
Oh, she's
"Ah,
so
you've
nice.
never even read his book." And she's like, "I don't. It doesn't matter. He's he's
Kim's
going
so
places."
good.
And now look here you are,
Well,
24 24 Harbath books later.
yeah. 24
That's
Harvard
incredible.
books.
Would you ever
Yeah.
decide? Would you ever say, "Oh, going forward, I'm just going to do a book without him"?
You know what? I think I'd like to do some stuff, some offshoots, so it's not the same, sleeve of IP, if you will. If I think Hollywood, we've got our deal with Sony, and we're getting ready to make a big announcement. I haven't gotten the clearance to make the announcement yet, but basically, Sony owns all of them. So I
Uh,
would love to be able to do other things just to get more stuff to the big screen and to TV, to do
right.
standalone novels, that kind of a thing would be a lot of fun. Plus, it's a challenge, like I said, now that Harvath's sitting on a mountain of money because he was able to claw back, able to negotiate half of the bounty on his head, split it with somebody else, and walk away still breathing. It's like that's a lot of dough. Harvath doesn't ever have to work again. So and I take this stuff so seriously, Kyle, that I don't want to go tropey. Like his wife got kidnapped. Now Harvath's
Yeah,
back in the
right.
hunt. I really want to do stuff that people don't see coming. So I definitely did that with Edge of Honor. And but yeah, I've got several more Harvath books in me. So there's more
Yeah.
Harvath books coming. I'm still going to crank one out every single year, but I do want to do some stuff outside the Harvath universe. I think that'd be fun. I think it'd be fun for readers and a chance to touch new readers by introducing a completely new line, if you will.
It's an interesting thing to do because, I just started, I left the Mitch Rapp universe, which has basically the same number of books as the Harvath universe that you have to meticulously keep track of everything. And did a book and I thought, wow, there's no background really here. There's a little bit, but I can just go any direction I want. He can, the personalities can be completely different. You can also, it's like marking everything to the present date because, there's so much history. You can't ever say, well, this is the reality of today. So I kind of got to start with the reality of 2024, 2025 and
Hmm.
move forward with it as opposed to having to remember what every fictional president was going back, 25 years or
CIA
something. So
directors and
it's
all the people that he's crossed paths with. Yeah, it's a lot.
yeah,
It's a
it's
spider
it's
web.
kind of like it's a little freeing in some sense because you think, oh, he's going to do this, but no, oh, has he already done that, or would he do that because of his history with so and so and stuff like that?
Hmm.
So it's yeah, hopefully he'll get to do it. I mean, would you ever consider doing more than one a year? Because a lot of people are doing that, but I can't.
I did 1 year, I did two books. So I've written 25 total. 24 with Harvath. In the 25th, had Harvath for like a chapter where I introduced the all-female Delta Force team called the
Yep,
Athena Project.
I
That
remember
year I
that. Yeah.
wrote two, and that was a pretty heavy lift. I, I don't know. I've gotten I haven't gotten slower. I've gotten to be more of a perfectionist and more meticulous the longer I've been at this. I really strive for absolute perfection in the books. I don't want to have any mistakes. I don't want to have anything tactically wrong, anything equipment wise wrong. So it's such a big deal to get one thriller out a year that's going to do well with the readers and the critics, and everybody's going to be happy, and the book has got a unique premise and it's cool stuff you haven't seen before. Like I'll tell you, I went to see last night. I went to see Ballerina, the new John Wick movie, and it had
Mhm.
stuff in there I had never seen before. It was
Really?
super cool. And what's also cool, I won't ruin it for people, but for my public television travel show, I did a whole episode in this one very cool village. This village was so freaking cool. I did an episode dedicated to it in a nearby town. They go there in Ballerina. And I also took my wife there as part of our honeymoon because this
Is
town's so
this in
cool.
Greece? Because I remember that show you
It's
did a
in
lot of stuff in Greece, right?
Nope, up further north in Europe. So it's
Hmm.
really it's very cool. But they did a bunch, and I'm not gonna put any spoilers for Ballerina in here because that's 8711 Entertainment, which is Chad Stahelski, who's the Wick director, who's the director for our Harvath TV series. So I'm not gonna put any spoilers out there on Chad's work, but they used weapons in there that I've never seen before in a thriller movie, and did stuff that I'd never seen before. It was awesome. The action in that movie, and Ana de Armas is fabulous. She could read the
Yeah,
phone
those
book
are.
for me and she'd be fabulous. But
It seems like the Wick stuff's always been pretty good. Like he's press checking things and stuff. Like they're
totally
really
legit.
meticulous about stuff like that, and they're super fun movies. It's fun
They
to
do
watch
some,
the pure action films.
yeah,
We
yeah,
the books are obviously a lot longer, but if you compress everything into 2 hours, they can be really breathless,
yeah, absolutely.
which is cool. All right. Well, I don't want to take up all day for you, but I appreciate you being on, and it's been great to see you again. I feel like it's been a long time.
Well, it's my pleasure. It was great seeing you. My everybody in the family said to say hello to you and Kim,
Yeah,
and
Kim
to
says
break.
hello.
Thank you. To break a leg on the new book, I saw that you'll be out. You start off in Poison Pen with the terrific Don Bentley interviewing you,
Yeah,
huh?
in the at the yeah the end of the at the end of July, and you Edge of Honor will be out the beginning of July.
First
Yes,
of July. Yeah, just in time
yes,
for the 4th of July weekend.
perfect. I will look very forward to reading it over the Fourth of
Well,
July weekend.
thanks, buddy. Good
All
seeing
right,
you.
talk to you later.
All right, man. See ya.
Bye bye.